It had been a week since I last saw Rohan. 7 long days. 7 days in which every corner of the house seemed to whisper his absence. I kept expecting him to walk through the door at any moment, his usual grin lighting up the room, complaining about how much homework he had, or asking me to help with some problem that seemed trivial to everyone else but was monumental to him. But the house was unusually quiet, a little too quiet. Every creak in the floorboards, every shadow cast by the evening light, felt heavier without his presence. Even the familiar scent of his favorite cologne lingered faintly in his room. A cruel reminder that he had been here, and yet now he was gone. His bed was perfectly made, almost suspiciously neat, and the clothes in his closet were untouched. It was as though time itself had paused, holding its breath in anticipation of some revelation I wasn't yet ready for. And yet, in the midst of all this order, it felt empty, completely, painfully empty. I tried calling him. Once, twice, 3 times. Each time, the phone rang and rang, cutting off before he could pick up. My messages were left unread, the little ticks of acknowledgement absent. I checked his social media profiles obsessively, as if his life online could offer me a clue. But everything appeared normal there. Photos with friends, harmless memes, snippets of his day-to-day life. No hints of panic, no signs of sadness, no cryptic posts that might have hinted at a desire to escape. Nothing. Everything screamed normalcy, and yet he was physically absent. My husband, Raj, and I exchanged worried glances, our eyes silently asking the same question. Where is he? At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he had gone on a short trip with friends without mentioning it, something completely innocent. Perhaps he was caught up in a school project or a competition I didn't know about. But as the days dragged on, as Thursday turned into Friday, those rational explanations began to crumble. The silence wasn't just quiet, it was oppressive. Each room I walked into, each hallway I passed, felt like a reminder of his absence. The laughter that used to echo down the stairs, the sound of his feet running to grab a snack after school, the familiar rhythm of our lives, all of it was gone. By Friday morning, I could no longer bear the uncertainty. My chest felt tight, as though the very air in the house had thickened overnight. I had to know, had to confront the truth, no matter how unbearable it might be. Heart hammering, I walked past his room, trying to steady myself. I called out his name, my voice slightly trembling, carrying through the silent house. Rohan? Silence answered me, echoing back in a way that made my stomach twist. I stood there for a long moment, feeling more helpless than I ever had in my life. And then, almost like a sudden gust of wind, it occurred to me. The truth might be far stranger, far more unsettling than anything I had imagined. I dialed his number one last time, the phone shaking slightly in my hands. It rang, the tone echoing through the quiet rooms, and then it clicked. His voice answered calmly, almost too calmly. "Mom," he said. I froze. My stomach twisted in knots. His voice, familiar yet distant, sent a shiver down my spine. "Rohan, where are you? You've been gone all week," I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, trying not to let the panic creep in too much. There was a long pause on the other end, and then, softly but firmly, he said words that would change everything. "I moved out last week." I dropped the phone onto the sofa, my hands trembling uncontrollably. My mind struggled to process the words. Moved out? Last week? Without telling us? It was impossible. How could he do this? My son, my baby boy, had left the house without even a single hint, without so much as a note or a call. The world around me seemed to tilt, the floor beneath me unsteady. The shock was a physical weight pressing down on my chest, and in that moment, I felt a surge of emotions I could barely identify. Disbelief, betrayal, confusion, and an almost tangible fear. I walked into Raj's study, my steps heavy, my words barely above a whisper. "He moved out last week," I repeated, as though saying it aloud might help me understand, might make it real. Raj rubbed his temples, his face pale, the worry lines around his eyes suddenly sharp and pronounced. "Maybe he needed some independence," he said quietly, but even he didn't sound convinced. The possibility felt hollow, unsatisfying. We spent the rest of the evening going over every imaginable scenario, trying to reason why Rohan would leave without telling us. Had we missed signs of unhappiness? Had we been too wrapped up in our own lives to notice him slipping away? We searched for logic where perhaps there was none, clinging to explanations that felt like fragile lifeboats in a storm. As night fell, I wandered the house, my fingers brushing over his untouched possessions. His books neatly stacked on the shelves, his backpack still by the door, his favorite jacket hanging silently in the closet. Everything was in place, yet everything felt meaningless. I questioned myself endlessly. Had I done something wrong? Had I missed the moments when he tried to communicate, when he needed me most? Perhaps I had been too busy with work, with keeping the household running, with managing life in a way that left little room for noticing subtle shifts in a teenager's world. The house was quiet, and in that quiet, I could hear my own thoughts screaming at me. I promised myself I would find out why he had left, even if it took days, weeks, or months. I had to understand him before it was too late. I had to reach him, even if the bridge between us had suddenly grown longer and colder than ever before. I sat in the living room for hours, staring at the space where he used to sit, imagining the conversations we had, the jokes he used to make, the way he would roll his eyes at my nagging yet secretly enjoy it. My mind replayed every interaction from the past few months, analyzing every word, every look, searching for a clue I might have overlooked. Sleep eventually came, fitful and haunted by dreams of him disappearing, of doors closing silently behind him. And in the early hours of the morning, I resolved to act. I would reach out to his friends, his teachers, anyone who might know where he had gone or why. I would find my son, understand his choices, and remind him that, no matter how far he strayed, he would always have a home waiting for him. The sense of urgency, the determination, burned in me stronger than the fear. I couldn't let another day pass in this limbo of uncertainty. The empty house, silent and still, was a constant reminder of what I had lost and what I needed to regain. I knew the journey ahead would not be easy, that there would be moments of anger, frustration, and despair. But there was also hope, a fragile thread that refused to break. Somewhere, my son was out there, living a life he had chosen, and it was my task to bridge the gap he had created, to understand him before the distance became permanent. That night, I made a vow to myself. I would find him, understand him, and support him, even if the way forward was uncertain. And with that vow, I finally allowed myself to rest, though my heart remained restless, filled with the echoes of a house that had once been alive with laughter, now eerily quiet and waiting. The next morning, I awoke with a mix of determination and anxiety. Sleep had brought little comfort. My mind was still crowded with thoughts of Rohan, the unanswered questions gnawing at me relentlessly. I knew I couldn't sit idle any longer. I had to search for answers. After a quick breakfast with Raj, who was unusually quiet and pensive, I decided to start where it all began, Rohan's room. Entering the space, I felt a strange combination of familiarity and absence. Every object seemed to hold a memory, a fragment of the boy he used to be. The posters on the walls, his neatly folded clothes, the books lined up in perfect order. All of it seemed frozen in time. I began systematically going through everything. Drawers were pulled open, notebooks flipped through, pens and scraps of paper examined. Every little corner of the room whispered stories I thought I knew, yet now seemed foreign. It was in the bottom drawer of his desk that I noticed a small envelope, tucked carefully beneath a stack of old notebooks. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The envelope was simple, plain, yet there was something deliberate in the way it was positioned, as if he had anticipated that I would find it eventually. With a deep breath, I opened it. Inside was a neatly folded sheet of paper, the handwriting unmistakably his. "Dear Mom," it began. I paused, my throat tightening. The words seemed to carry both his voice and his absence. "I know this will come as a shock. I didn't mean to hurt you or Dad, but I had to make a choice for myself. I love you both more than anything, but I needed to figure out who I am without being constantly guided. I've moved into a small apartment nearby. Please don't worry about me. I am fine, and I hope you will understand someday." I sank into his chair, the letter trembling in my hands. Tears flowed freely down my cheeks. Part of me was relieved to know that he was safe, that he was okay. But another part of me felt abandoned, left out of a life I had nurtured with so much care and attention since the day he was born. My mind raced through memories of him as a child. His small hands reaching for mine, his first day at school, the countless nights I had stayed awake when he was sick. And now, here he was carving a space for himself without me. Slowly, I collected myself and called Raj. When he picked up, I handed him the letter, my hands still shaking. "See," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "He's okay." Raj took the paper, reading it silently. He nodded but didn't say anything immediately. I could see his mind working, processing the same mixture of pride, worry, and disbelief that I felt. After a few minutes, he finally spoke. "We should go see him," he said softly. His voice carried an unspoken reassurance. "We need to understand what he's doing, and we need to be there for him." I agreed, a sense of purpose replacing the anxiety that had gripped me all morning. We set out, driving through unfamiliar streets, winding past rows of small apartments, boutique cafes, and quiet residential buildings. The city seemed different from the one we were used to. It felt intimate, almost personal. Every street corner seemed alive with activity, yet there was a sense of calm, a rhythm that suggested life carried on at its own pace. After several wrong turns and a few stops to ask for directions, we finally arrived at a modest building tucked between two taller structures. Rohan's apartment was small and unassuming from the outside, nothing more than a tidy rectangle of concrete with a single door. Yet even from the street, I could see hints of his personality in the carefully arranged plants by the entrance and the neatness of the walkway. My heart thumped in my chest as we approached, a strange mixture of anticipation and fear gripping me. The door opened, and there he was. Rohan, carrying a few grocery bags, paused, his expression shifting from concentration to mild surprise, and then to a warm, guarded smile. "Mom, Dad," he said softly. "I didn't mean to surprise you like this." I stepped forward instinctively, almost reaching for him, but stopped, respecting the invisible space he had carved for himself. Raj and I followed him inside, taking in the modest apartment. It was neat and organized, yet alive with small touches that reflected his personality. Books were stacked neatly, some of them well-worn favorites. A few paintings he had created adorned the walls, showcasing a side of him we hadn't seen before. The kitchen was small but functional, with everything in its place, a testament to his growing independence. We spent the next few hours talking. Questions tumbled out of me. How he had chosen the apartment, how he was managing on his own, whether he missed us, whether he felt lonely. And slowly he answered, sharing his experiences, his routines, the little victories and challenges of living independently. His voice carried confidence, a newfound maturity that made my chest swell with pride, even as it ached with longing. I realized gradually that his decision wasn't a rejection of us. It wasn't about leaving his home or abandoning his family. It was about discovering his own identity, about learning to navigate the world on his own terms, making mistakes and learning from them. I watched him move around the apartment, arranging books, preparing a small snack, and I felt a mixture of awe and nostalgia. The boy who used to need help tying his shoes, who had once clung to my hand on his first day of school, was now standing confidently before me, independent, determined, and resilient. By the time evening fell, the apartment was filled with quiet laughter and gentle conversation. We shared memories, compared experiences, and even debated over trivial things like which shelf would hold his books better. Slowly, the initial shock softened, replaced by understanding, empathy, and a sense of connection that had seemed fragile just days before. I realized that this was the start of a new chapter in our relationship, a chapter in which I had to let go, but not of love. I had to allow him the freedom to grow, while still being a constant presence in his life. As we left, I looked back at the small apartment, now a symbol of both his independence and our enduring bond. I felt a profound mixture of pride and longing. Rohan was out in the world, shaping his own life, but he had not forgotten us. That evening, as we drove back home, the city lights flickering past, I held Raj's hand and silently vowed to support our son in every way possible, even if it meant watching him take risks, stumble, and rise again on his own. For the first time since he had disappeared, I felt a fragile sense of peace. Rohan was safe, he was learning, and he was thriving. And though the house would remain quieter, at least for now, I understood that this silence was not emptiness. It was space for growth, for independence, and for love that would always find its way back. Returning home that night felt strangely surreal. The house, which had always been filled with the energy of Rohan's presence, now seemed quieter, emptier, almost like it was holding its breath. Every step echoed, every creak of the floorboards sounded louder than it should have. I wandered through the rooms, glancing at his bed, his neatly folded clothes, the books still arranged just as they had been, and felt the ache of absence settle deeper into my chest. I realized how much I had taken for granted, how much I had assumed Rohan would always be there. His laughter echoing through the hallways, the way he would drop his backpack carelessly on the floor, or call out for snacks at odd hours. Now, all of that was gone, replaced by a heavy silence that felt almost suffocating. Raj and I tried to adjust to this new reality, creating routines to fill the void, but nothing felt quite normal. Meals felt quieter without him, and the small habits that once defined our daily life, the sound of his music drifting from his room, the clutter of his schoolwork on the dining table, were suddenly missing. I found myself checking my phone constantly, hoping for a message, a call, a little sign that he was thinking of us. Sometimes I would catch a glimpse of his old backpack leaning against the wall or his sneakers by the door, and my heart would ache with longing. It was as if the house itself mourned him alongside us, the walls holding on to memories that seemed to whisper his name. Meanwhile, Rohan was thriving. His calls became the highlight of my day, bringing both joy and a bittersweet pang of missing him. He spoke of small victories, successfully cooking his first full meal, figuring out how to balance his bills, keeping track of his work schedule. He laughed when he described mishaps in the kitchen, when he accidentally overcooked rice or spilled sauce on the floor. He also shared the challenges, how he had underestimated the difficulty of living alone, how he sometimes felt lonely, how he missed the familiarity of home. Each conversation was a mix of pride and longing. I was proud of him, amazed at how capable and responsible he had become. Yet at the same time, I missed the daily presence of my son, the little routines that had defined our family life. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, I began to adjust alongside him. I stopped obsessively checking my phone every hour, though I still looked forward to his calls. Raj and I found ways to fill our evenings, catching up on shows we had neglected, tackling small projects around the house, or simply sharing quiet conversations over tea. But the emptiness never completely disappeared. It lingered, a gentle ache that reminded me of the new phase of life we were entering. One evening, a thought struck me, a desire to bridge the distance that had grown between us. I decided to surprise Rohan with his favorite homemade dinner. Chicken curry with naan, the dish he had always requested on weekends. I carefully packed it, imagining the look on his face when he opened the door. The drive to his apartment felt longer than usual, my mind swirling with anticipation and nervousness. What if he was busy? What if he didn't want visitors? But I pushed those doubts aside, focusing on the excitement of reconnecting in a tangible way. When I knocked on his door, I held my breath. The door opened slowly, and there he was, standing in the small hallway, carrying groceries from earlier. His eyes widened in surprise, and then a nervous laugh escaped him. "Mom, what's this?" he asked, half amused, half confused. I smiled, handing him the carefully packed meal. "Just a little something for you," I said warmly, feeling a rush of warmth and love flood through me. His smile softened, and for a moment, the distance between us seemed to shrink. We settled in his modest kitchen, the aroma of home-cooked food filling the air. That night, we ate together, sharing stories, reminiscing about old memories, and laughing at small, silly moments from the past. He told me about a funny incident at his apartment, how he had tried to rearrange his books and ended up knocking over an entire shelf. I recounted a memory from his childhood, about the time he had painted the walls of his room in bright colors while I was out, leaving me with a mess to clean. Laughter bridged the gap, bringing us closer in a way words alone never could. As we sat there, I began to understand something profound. Parenting did not end with guiding him through childhood or making every decision for him. It was not about controlling every aspect of his life or sheltering him from every mistake. Parenting meant letting go, trusting him, and finding new ways to support him. It meant celebrating his independence, even when it came with an ache in my heart. I realized that love did not mean control. It meant understanding, patience, and presence, even from a distance. Over the next few weeks, I made a conscious effort to embrace this new role. I called less obsessively, trusting Rohan to manage his life, but remained available whenever he needed guidance or support. I sent little messages, asking about his day or reminding him to eat properly, while letting him lead the conversation. Raj and I began to focus on our own relationship, rediscovering the little joys of spending time together while still staying connected to Rohan's life. Slowly, the house began to feel less empty. The absence of Rohan was still there, a quiet reminder of change, but it no longer felt suffocating. I started noticing the small ways in which life had shifted. How Raj would leave a note on the kitchen counter for me, how I would plan meals that we could enjoy together, how the quiet evenings became opportunities for reflection rather than reminders of loss. I realized that this adjustment was not just about Rohan. It was about all of us learning to redefine our lives, to accept change, and to grow alongside it. One night, after another long conversation with Rohan over the phone, I sat quietly in the living room. I reflected on how far he had come, how resilient he had become, and how much he still needed us, even in his independence. I thought about the small dinner we had shared, the laughter we had exchanged, and the bond that had strengthened despite the physical distance. I smiled softly, feeling a quiet pride swell in my chest. Parenting, I realized, was a journey without a clear endpoint. It evolved as children grew, as circumstances changed, and as life demanded new forms of love and support. And in this new chapter, I was learning to trust Rohan, to let him make mistakes, to cheer for his successes, and to be there when he needed me, without smothering or controlling him. It was not always easy, and the ache of missing him would never fully disappear, but it was a different kind of love, one that was deeper, stronger, and more enduring than I had ever imagined. By the time I finally went to bed that night, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't known in weeks. Rohan was safe, he was happy, and he was thriving. And while the house remained quieter, at least for now, I understood that silence could be comforting too, a space for growth, reflection, and the gentle assurance that love transcended proximity. Life, I soon realized, was not without its challenges. Rohan's transition into independent living was exciting, yes, but it was also full of obstacles, some expected and some that caught him, and us, completely off guard. The freedom he had sought came with responsibilities that he had never faced before, bills that seemed endless, deadlines that loomed larger than life, and the quiet moments when loneliness crept in like a shadow, whispering doubts he had never admitted aloud. The first few weeks were relatively smooth. He called frequently, sharing stories of small victories. Successfully cooking a new recipe, navigating public transport alone, or making a friend in his building. But soon, the calls took on a different tone. Frustration, exhaustion, and anxiety laced his voice. "Mom, I've got 3 deadlines this week, and I still haven't figured out how to set up the internet properly," he confessed one night, his words clipped, tinged with panic. I could hear the tension in every syllable, the strain of trying to juggle everything on his own. Raj and I had to remind ourselves constantly to be patient. We had spent years guiding him, protecting him, solving problems before he even noticed them. Now, we had to resist the urge to take over, to fix things immediately. Our role had shifted. We were no longer the hands-on problem solvers. We were the mentors, the advisors, the emotional anchor, supporting him without hovering, without diminishing his sense of independence. It was difficult, especially at first. Each call where he sounded overwhelmed made my stomach twist, a mix of worry and helplessness I hadn't anticipated. Then came the day when his world was truly shaken. Rohan's roommate, a college friend he had moved in with temporarily, had to leave suddenly due to family reasons. The call came in the late afternoon, and I could hear the panic immediately, even before he said a word. "Mom, I don't know what to do. He left today, and now I'm stuck with the whole apartment, the bills, the chores, everything." His voice cracked, the stress palpable. I felt a pang in my chest, knowing exactly how it felt to face overwhelming responsibility for the first time. I took a deep breath. "Okay, Rohan," I said, keeping my voice calm. "First, let's take it step by step. You can handle this. I'll guide you, but you'll do the work." He let out a shaky sigh, relief just beginning to soften the panic. I walked him through the immediate necessities. How to split the bills for the month, which tasks needed priority, and even small things like how to clean the apartment efficiently without feeling overwhelmed. It was exhausting to hear his stress, but I knew this was necessary. Over the next hour, we worked through everything together. I didn't do it for him. I guided, suggested, asked questions that made him think. "What's the first thing you need to tackle?" I asked. "Which bills have deadlines first?" I prompted. Slowly, he started to regain control, listing out tasks, making a plan, and even laughing at some of the absurdities of adult life, like realizing he had no idea how to operate the washing machine properly. By the end of the evening, he had managed everything on his own. Hearing the pride in his voice as he reported his accomplishments filled me with a quiet, overwhelming relief. He had done it. He had handled chaos independently. These challenges, though stressful, began to transform our relationship. The dynamic shifted subtly but unmistakably. We were no longer just parents. We were mentors, sounding boards, advisors, and constant support systems. Our conversations grew more thoughtful, more collaborative. Rohan would discuss his strategies, ask for input, and sometimes even debate our suggestions. It was different from the childhood days of do as I say. It was a partnership, one built on trust and mutual respect. I realized then that love evolves, just as parenting evolves. It was no longer about control or correcting mistakes before they happened. It was about trust, guidance, and letting him grow into the person he was meant to become. Despite our careful guidance, there were nights when he called frustrated or on the verge of tears, and I had to remind myself to step back. "It's okay to make mistakes, Rohan," I said gently one evening, sensing the frustration in his voice. "You're learning. Every mistake teaches you something, even if it feels terrible in the moment." He sighed, a mix of relief and lingering tension. "I know, Mom, but sometimes it feels like too much all at once." I understood. This wasn't just about managing an apartment. It was about facing life head-on, without the safety net he had grown up with. And yet, there were small victories that reminded me of how far he had come. I remembered the time he called, excited, to tell us that he had hosted his first small dinner for his new friends. "I actually cooked an entire meal without burning anything," he laughed. Hearing that joy in his voice made the stress of the past weeks seem worth it. I realized that these challenges, though daunting, were shaping him into someone capable, resilient, and confident. Raj and I also learned new ways to support him. We scheduled weekly check-ins, not to control his life, but to share advice, celebrate successes, and provide guidance when he asked. Each conversation required restraint, patience, and careful listening. Sometimes we offered solutions. Sometimes we simply listened as he worked through his thoughts aloud. It was a delicate balance, learning to be present without interfering, supportive without overstepping. Over time, I noticed subtle changes in Rohan. He became more assertive, more confident in decision-making, and more willing to seek advice when he needed it, rather than panic or withdraw. And in turn, Raj and I grew as parents too, learning to embrace this new stage of life, letting go of old patterns, and trusting that our son was capable of navigating the world independently. One particularly challenging week, Rohan faced a series of overlapping deadlines for work and school. He called late at night, the frustration evident in every word. I guided him through prioritization, helping him break down tasks into manageable steps rather than solving everything for him. He followed each suggestion, and by morning, he had completed everything successfully. I hung up the phone, feeling a surge of pride so strong it brought tears to my eyes. He had faced the storm and emerged stronger. Through these challenges, I realized something profound. Love is not static. Parenting is not a fixed role that ends when children grow older. It evolves, stretching, bending, and adapting as life demands. Our relationship with Rohan had changed. It was no longer about oversight or daily care, but about trust, guidance, and unconditional support. We had moved into a phase where being present emotionally mattered more than physically intervening. It was a shift that required patience, humility, and faith in him. By the end of the month, I noticed a quiet satisfaction settling over all of us. Rohan had grown into his independence, and Raj and I had grown into our new roles as advisors rather than direct caretakers. The challenges had been real, intense, and sometimes exhausting, but they had also strengthened the bond between us. We were no longer just his parents. We were partners in his journey, sharing both the triumphs and the struggles, witnessing him evolve into the adult he was becoming. And as I sat quietly one evening, reflecting on the calls, the challenges, and the victories, I understood something I hadn't fully grasped before. Parenting doesn't end when children leave home. It transforms, reshaping itself around trust, guidance, and the enduring presence of love. Challenges were no longer obstacles. They were the bridges that connected us in new ways, allowing our relationship with Rohan to deepen, mature, and thrive. Months passed, and with each day, the initial shock of Rohan's sudden departure slowly faded into something gentler. An acceptance, an understanding of the young man he was becoming. Life settled into a new rhythm, one that I hadn't anticipated but gradually learned to embrace. Rohan grew more confident with every passing week, navigating his life with a mix of determination, patience, and humor. Raj and I, in turn, grew more comfortable with his independence, finding pride in the little updates he shared and reassurance in the way he handled both victories and setbacks. Visits became more frequent, sometimes planned, sometimes spontaneous, and each time I felt a quiet thrill seeing him walk through the door. The house no longer felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for him. It hummed again, alive with the warmth of laughter, conversation, and the familiarity of his presence, however fleeting it might be. Watching him in his element, moving confidently around his own apartment, managing responsibilities and sharing stories from his days, I began to realize that this independence wasn't a wedge between us. It was an opportunity for our relationship to grow in ways I had never imagined. I learned to celebrate his achievements without feeling possessive, to comfort him during failures without trying to intervene, and to trust him with decisions I once felt compelled to make on his behalf. I understood that this was the essence of parenting a young adult, knowing when to guide, when to step back, and when to simply be present. Every phone call, every visit, became less about monitoring his life and more about sharing it, being a part of it without controlling it. One evening, as we sat together in the living room of his apartment, the soft glow of the table lamp illuminating the room, Rohan spoke in a way that caught me off guard. His voice was quiet, tentative, but firm. "Mom," he began, looking directly at me, "I was scared to tell you I was moving out. I didn't know how you'd react, but I needed to do this for myself." My chest tightened and tears welled up in my eyes, not from worry, but from pride and understanding. I reached out and held his hands in mine, feeling the warmth and reassurance of his presence. "Rohan," I whispered, my voice trembling with emotion, "we are proud of you always. No matter what choices you make, we will always support you. You've grown so much, and I couldn't be prouder of the person you're becoming." He smiled, a little shy, a little relieved, and leaned into my embrace. In that moment, I felt a sense of connection that transcended the distance, the months of uncertainty, and the initial shock of his departure. It was a bond strengthened by trust, respect, and understanding, one that could endure any change, any challenge, or any separation. Over time, I noticed subtle changes in the way I approached parenting and life itself. I stopped measuring my love by proximity or constant contact. I realized that love doesn't require control or surveillance. It thrives on trust, patience, and belief in the other person's capability. Rohan's independence became a mirror, reflecting not only his growth but mine as well. I had learned to let go, to embrace uncertainty, and to celebrate life unfolding in ways I could not fully control but could wholeheartedly support. Our conversations deepened too. We no longer discussed only day-to-day routines or small triumphs. We shared our fears, our hopes, and our reflections. Rohan spoke about his dreams, the lessons he was learning, and the mistakes that were shaping him into a more resilient, thoughtful adult. I listened, offering advice only when asked, and simply holding space for him when he needed to process life's complexities. Raj and I became partners in his journey in a new way, mentors, confidants, and unwavering supporters rather than hands-on caretakers. One rainy afternoon, I sat by his window, watching the droplets race down the glass as he sketched quietly on his notepad. He looked up and caught my gaze, a small smile playing on his lips. "I never realized how much I'd appreciate these moments," he said softly. "Being on my own taught me a lot, but I also missed having you around. I didn't know I'd miss you this much." I felt a lump in my throat. "I missed you too," I admitted honestly. "But seeing you grow, seeing you take charge of your life, it makes me proud, even more than I could ever explain. I understand now why you had to do this, and I respect it. And I want you to know that, no matter where life takes you, I'll always be here." He reached out and took my hand, squeezing it gently. "Thanks, Mom. I needed to hear that. I think I'm starting to understand too. That independence doesn't mean leaving you behind. It's about learning to stand on my own while knowing you'll always be there." That evening, as we shared a simple dinner, the room filled with quiet conversation and occasional laughter, I reflected on the journey we had all traveled. The shock, the worry, the challenges, they were all part of the process of growing together in new ways. I realized that the house no longer felt empty, not because of his physical presence alone, but because I had come to understand that love does not depend on proximity. It depends on trust, respect, understanding, and the unbreakable bond that exists between a parent and child. I also recognized that parenting is a lifelong journey. It evolves with time, adapting to the needs and growth of our children. Sometimes it requires letting go, sometimes stepping in, but always, always, it requires love in its purest, most patient form. And in that understanding, I found not only peace, but pride, a deep, abiding pride that comes from watching someone you love become exactly who they are meant to be. As the months continued, our visits became more natural, our conversations richer, and our lives more intertwined in this new, evolved way. I saw Rohan succeed and stumble, plan and improvise, laugh and grow. Each step he took reinforced the lesson that independence and connection could coexist. He was living fully, and we were learning to support that life without holding him back. One quiet evening, as the three of us, Rohan, Raj, and I, sat together in the living room, I felt a profound sense of calm. There were no crises, no frantic calls, no panic over sudden absences. There was simply love, trust, and understanding, the kind that lasts a lifetime. I realized that the journey we had traveled, from shock to adjustment, through challenges to growth, had brought us closer than ever before. I looked at Rohan, now so confidently standing on his own, yet still seeking connection with us, and smiled. The house was no longer empty, for love had filled every corner, every room, and every silent space with the reassurance of presence, even at a distance. In that understanding, I found peace. In that pride, I found joy. And in that deep, enduring connection, I found a new definition of family. One that embraced independence, celebrated growth, and cherished the bond that could never be broken.